Hey, gang, welcome to First Aid for Families. Once again, my name is Pastor Justin Kaysen. This is Pastor Bryan Ewing. Today, we're going to talk about anxiety and depression. And we want to start off this conversation with the simple disclaimer that neither one of us are clinically trained counselors, right? We're not
That's right.
psychologists or psychiatrists. We are pastors who have done a lot of counseling of teenagers, a lot of helping in this area. But we're talking from experience, not from educational background or from licensing. Okay, so just want to make sure we're all aware of that ahead of time. We are not saying, hey, don't listen to your counselor. We love counselors. We love psychologists. We think they're really awesome people and they should be used often for everyone. But that's not what we are. So just a heads up on that. And for this topic of anxiety and depression, that's a really important thing. So Brian's gonna be leading us today. I'll pop in and ask a couple questions, but we'll let him speak. So go ahead, sir.
All right. So thank you guys for joining us. So as Justin said, we are not practicing psychologists or psychiatrists. We've both done an amount of counseling in this area, and though we're happy to continue to meet with individuals who suffer with anxiety and depression, we will refer those individuals over to someone who's trained in that area. However, I do come from a background where in my household, we have dealt with anxiety and panic attacks and then a little bit of depression as well. My wife in the past has suffered with a great deal of anxiety and then, subsequently panic attacks. And then just because of family history, I am prone to depression, so I have to watch that. And so today we kind of wanted to help out. I kind of wanted to help out generally first, and then get specifically into our students and our teenagers, specifically in this time where we're in quarantine, because it becomes easy just to isolate yourself and then to fall into those negative patterns and just have negative thoughts around your head. So let's go ahead and start off with just a couple of things, and remember that as I'm talking about this, I'm coming from a pastoral perspective, and so I'm going to address a couple of things from that perspective. So the first one is that anxiety and depression are very, very real. They're very real things. Many people will say, "Oh, it's just all in your head." That's not true. They're actually very, very real things that should be taken and need to be taken seriously. And so, coming from a pastoral perspective, I think that the church overall has done a pretty poor job of handling people within the church who suffer from anxiety and depression. So let me give you a for instance on that. So someone's suffering from, and they come to a pastor or they even come to prayer team, whatever in the church, and they express that they're suffering with anxiety and or depression. And by the way, they sometimes go together, anxiety and depression, but not always. Sometimes they're actually separate from one another. So an individual may suffer with anxiety and not depression, and vice versa. Or they may suffer with both. But sometimes they'll come to somebody within the church and go, "Hey, I'm suffering with this." They're just told from a churchy type of perspective, "Well, here's what you need to do. Just pray more and lean into Jesus." And so as a pastor, I think we should be praying more, and I think we should be leaning into Jesus. However, I think that there are certain things in life, certain conditions in life that include those but need more. So the for instance I give in that area is when we look in scripture, we look in the book of Acts, and we see John and Peter going into the temple, and there's a lame guy sitting there at the water right next to the temple area. And so when they see his need, what they don't say, Peter doesn't say, "Here's what you need to do. You need to pray harder and you need to lean into Jesus." He actually, as an ambassador of God, takes action to help this guy out in the area that he knows, in which he knows how to help not in. And so I believe that God has given us doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists for the same exact reason. They're professionals in this area that are going to help us manage and navigate and cope with some of these really extreme cases. So that leads me to my next point, which is this. If you need to see a doctor, if your child needs to see a doctor, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in going and seeing a doctor, and having counseling sessions with them. Like I said, I'm a pastor, and my wife went and saw a psychologist for a while, and it was very helpful. She was able to give my wife a lot of tools, a lot of coping mechanisms that she could use, and just to have another outlet from someone who's not, in the immediate family, I think it was really, really good for my wife to have. I'm
And
always.
I was going to say, Bryan, I think it's important to recognize too that seeing a counselor, you don't have to have a condition to be able to see this. Sometimes it's just checking in.
Yeah.
I know that for the Methodist Church, we have to do psych evaluations before we start the process of becoming ordained, and they suggest, hey, you need to check in at least every 6 months with a counselor, not because you have an issue per se, but just so you have someone to talk to that can recognize, oh, there's some warning signs here. I think you're taking this the wrong way, or I think you're. So it's not just, oh, I have an issue, I have to go see a counselor. People who are very healthy are healthy because they see counselors.
Yep.
That's why they're healthy. So I just want to add that in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but if you happen to be suffering with anxiety and or depression, or your child is, there's no shame in that. I would, definitely go see a doctor in that area. So, for parents specifically, and specifically when it comes to this time that we're kind of living in right now with the quarantine that we're going through, and it seems like things are getting more and more limited. Hopefully, it'll loosen up a little bit as we move on, and the sooner the better. But we want to be safe about that. But definitely pay attention to the behaviors of your students. One of the things with the stigma of someone who might be suffering with anxiety and depression is that they don't necessarily, especially teenagers, they don't take the initiative to go out and talk about it. They don't take the initiative to go out and talk about anything, honestly. I mean, how many conversations have we had with our kids? Like, how was your day today? Good. That's like the extent of it, right? It's like, what'd you do today? Not much. It's like, really, you were at school for 6 hours, and then you had an after school program and you did nothing all day. And so, it's up to us as parents to initiate those conversations with our kids. So if you see your child kind of separating themselves from everybody and just going off and being isolated, check in with them. It doesn't mean that they're suffering from anxiety or depression, but definitely check in with them and make sure they're okay. There's actually a funny story I have from a lady at the church I was at in California. Her son was in my youth group, and she came to me after church one Sunday. She was just crying, and she's like, "I think he's got anxiety or depression. I don't know what it is, but he keeps shutting himself in his room." And I was like, "Well, okay, is he exhibiting any other behaviors?" And she's like, "No, he's just in his room for hours on end." And I was like, "Well, here's the thing. He and I and a bunch of the other kids at church play a game on our mobile devices called Clash Royale, and he's really active in this game. So I would bet he's in his room playing Clash Royale. You might want to talk to him about his screen time, but I don't know that I would go right to anxiety and depression. And you talk to him about that. This conversation that you can have.
He may be causing anxiety and depression in others at that point on Clash,
depending on how much you play. But you might want to talk to him about his screen time. But so just because your students isolating themselves doesn't mean they have a condition. But make sure that you're paying attention. You're checking out. So. The last one is this, and I want us to be able to, as we go through and talk about some coping mechanisms. The last one for me is really, really important. Anxiety and depression never, ever go away. It's not something you get over. And so, it's like losing a child. My sister lost her firstborn. My nephew passed away 7 years ago, and it's just not something you get over. If you've ever lost a child or even a parent, you don't get over that. It just is something that you manage each and every day. And some days are better and some days are worse. And so if you're suffering from anxiety and depression, you have these tools. You have to know that each and every day you're going to get up and it's going to be a battle. And some days are going to be better than others. And if you have a bad day, the benefit is there's tomorrow. And you can reset tomorrow, and don't come down too hard on yourself if you have a bad day. If your child is suffering from one of these two conditions and they have a bad day, give grace in that area and know that tomorrow's a new day and that they can absolutely come back from it. So we just want to spend the rest of the time today, just giving some just some techniques and some helpful tools that can help out in this area. So as I've done a lot of reading in this area in the past and recently, because it's, again, something that we've dealt with in our house. There are three really major categories, and there's a bunch of sub things under those that can help you. But the three major categories are mind, body, and action. And so I know I just said, I don't believe it's true that it's just in your head. It's not just in your head, but there's a portion of it that revolves around your thoughts. And so when it comes to how to deal with what's in your mind, I think one of the biggest things that I found with my wife and with the people that we've counseled, because she's gone through this, and we've counseled several couples through this, is that you can't change everything, and you can't fix everything. And I think during this time where we're, just kind of sitting around, huddled in our homes, we realize how little control we actually have. But this goes in normal everyday life anyway. You're driving down the 65 down to Lafayette or to Indy. You're in control of your vehicle, but there's 100 other vehicles around you that you don't have control over. And so we can't control everything. And so a lot of people who deal with anxiety and depression have, they see things the way that they think they ought to be, but they can't control them because there's so many X factors. Even in our own households, we can control ourselves, but it's really limited when it comes to how much control we have over our kids or over our spouse. We have influence, but control is a whole nother ball of wax. So accepting that you can't control everything, I think, is a big deal. And as we do anything, to do our best. So if we aim for perfection, that may cause a great deal of anxiety and could lead to depression. So if we want everything to be perfect, that's hard to attain, and that's not going to be attainable in any given area all the time. It just can't happen. In whatever we do, to maintain a positive attitude in our approach to all those things that we do. So negative thoughts and negative approaches oftentimes are one of the triggers to anxiety and depression. And bring up triggers, learn what triggers your anxiety. There's a variety of things, which I'll go over in a minute, that might be contributors that could contribute to those triggers. And so stay away from those things, or at least know what they are, so when they come at you, you can manage them a little bit better.
I just want to point out too, Bryan, that as you're talking about this is not just for your team. This is also for you, because if you're not managing this yourself, you're showing them that there's a negative coping mechanism they could do as well. So if the way that you respond when you're anxious or depressed is to yell at your kids and lash out, they could see that as, okay, this is what you do. When you're anxious, you lash out, and then you're just perpetuating that cycle. So
and they're going to do it right back to you.
Right. So you got to get that self-care down as well. So, hey, you have to look at yourself. Am I anxious? Am I depressed? Is there something going on here? And then begin working on that. And then once you've come out of that a little bit, look at your team and say, okay, where are they at? Because you can't help if you're also sick in that area.
Right. So the second major category is your body. And so the body is important. If you've ever stayed up all night and then the next day you've tried to do something that was very detailed oriented, your mind doesn't think well. You haven't taken care of your body well. If you don't eat well, it can become, a problem. And so taking care of your body. So limit your caffeine intake. Caffeine is not a terrible thing, but too much of it can aggravate anxiety and trigger panic attacks. And so just make sure that there's a balance there. I know a lot of people love coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker, but it can have an effect for adults. Limiting alcohol intake also is a big deal. Eating well-balanced meals. We had a youth kid at our old church, and she suffered from a little bit of depression. And one of the things that was, I think, was problematic was all she would eat was Cheetos. And so I love Cheetos, but you have to balance that stuff out. And if that's all you're eating, you're not getting a well-rounded nutritional diet. And so your body is not prepared to deal physically with things that are coming, like viruses, bacteria, stuff like that, but also with stuff that may be attacking you mentally as well. And so having a well-rounded, a balanced diet is good. If you realize, hey, I don't like to eat these certain things, you may need to take a vitamin. We take vitamins over here that helps kind of round out, our intake of a well-balanced diet. So getting enough sleep is a huge deal. And so I always, when I was a professor at a university, and I always had conferences with my students. And with college students, I would always tell them, college students have to do three things. They have to eat, they have to sleep, and they have to study. But you only get to pick two. And so the two that they usually pick is eating and studying, if they're high functioning students. It means they're losing out on some sleep. And so we have to make sure we're getting enough sleep. If we're not getting enough sleep, our brain just becomes susceptible to all the negative stuff that comes in because we get irritated easier. We have a lot less patience than we had before. And this goes both for us, like Justin said, us and our children. So, if you go, okay, time to go to bed, and your child goes to bed and they're in bed at 10 o'clock, but they're up watching YouTube till 2 o'clock in the morning, they're not getting enough sleep. They're waking up at 8 and just not functioning well at all. And so that leaves them susceptible to a variety of things. Another thing for your body is exercise daily. It doesn't have to be rigorous exercise, though some people enjoy that. That's great. It can just be a walk around the neighborhood. I know that in watching interviews with Dave Chappelle, Dave and his friend were writing this show, and then suddenly they get a $300 million check. And there was a lot of pressure. And so he had anxiety and panic. And he panicked and went to Africa. And when he came back, he said his negative coping mechanism for that anxiety was chain smoking. And so he realized that it was a negative coping mechanism. So he said, I got to get rid of that. I got to stop doing that. And so, but he had to fill the gap. He just couldn't stop doing it and not do anything else. And so what he started doing, he started hitting the gym pretty hard. He started weightlifting a lot and doing a lot of running. And I'm not saying that you have to, you don't have to, become Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And you can't go to the gym right now either. So don't go to your gym.
Don't go to your gym right now, right? But, we have an elliptical at home. We have a mat that we can put out, and we can do even something like yoga, just stretching, general walks, getting some sort of exercise. It's been hard up until about a week and a half ago to get out because the weather's not been great. It's been raining. It's been really cold. But, if you can get out, get out. If you can't, you can still do stuff in the confines of your own home. So daily exercise is really good. That helps with that. And then the third thing is action. So one of the actions you can do is just deep breathing. You can take deep breaths, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. You can do this for 2 to 5 minutes. That can help out. Slowly counting to 10. And do that as many times as you need to. Another thing that you can do, and it's really, again, hard to do in the condition that we're kind of in right now, but and I'm all about this. One of the greatest things you can do is get involved in community. When you're around other people, when you're getting involved in community and you're giving back, it's a huge thing for you to be able to to deal with what you're going through. As well. So take a time out. Take a time out, listen to music, do some relaxing things for me. The relaxing thing that I love to do is I love playing video games. So if I've had a long day and I just go, okay, I'm just going to play some baseball for a little while, not real baseball because my shoulders are gone, but, I get on video game, play a little bit of baseball. My wife, we bought 3 puzzles. She loves to sit down and do puzzles, but she also loves doing artwork. She loves doing photography, like this behind me, as well as other things. And so those relaxing techniques, whatever they are for you, as long as they're not a negative one, are something that you can definitely do as an action plan. And talk to somebody. Again, as an adult, we need to be able to initiate that, not only for ourselves, but with our kids as well. They're probably not going to come to us and initiate those conversations. So we have to be proactive on that. So there's some immediate things that you can do. I talked about the practicing deep breathing. Again, 4 counts in, 4 counts out. You can do this for up to 5 minutes, and just even slow breaths to slow down your heart rate. When it came to my wife's anxiety and panic attacks, what I discovered after a bit of time and looking at it was that her level of anxiety wasn't too high. It was that it was misapplied. So if you got a phone call right now that a close loved one got into a car accident and was in critical care in the hospital, you would have a certain level of anxiety and an appropriate level of anxiety for that situation. The problem is when you take that level of anxiety and you apply it to a mess on the couch. And so we found, and it's different for everybody, but with my wife, what we found was that she was taking that level of anxiety that was appropriate for this situation over here, but she was applying it to all situations, and it was just building up and building up and building up until eventually she woke up at 2:00 in the morning with a panic attack and ended up having to go to the ER. Now, again, it happens differently for everybody. For us, this is how we discovered it. And so as we've moved from California to Indiana, our life has slowed down dramatically, really helped out my wife's anxiety. But she's even turned to me in the past year and a half or so and said, I'm anxious right now. Is this out of balance or is this appropriate? And there are times when I've gone, no, it's appropriate. This is a pretty intense situation. Her mom was having stroke-like symptoms, and my wife was like, I'm really anxious about this. I'm like, yeah, well, your mom's having stroke-like symptoms. That's a circumstance in which you would be a little bit anxious. It's when we take that stuff and apply it to our child not making their bed, that becomes an issue because now it's just building up in us, and it's an issue for for them in the same way. And so when they become over anxious about things in life that really aren't a 10, they're a 3, that can start building up. So we need to be able to talk that out with them and talk them through those situations.
One thing you said, Bryan, I want to come back to a little bit is about that community aspect. And yeah, it's hard right now, but we're a firm believer in our youth group. I'm sure you're there as well. That one caring adult outside of the parent is one of the most effective things that could ever, be a part of a kid's life. So maybe they don't want to talk to you about it. Maybe they want to talk to someone else. And during this time, I know you guys are doing youth group. We're doing youth group during this time electronically. If your kid starts pulling away, shameless plug, get them involved into a youth group where there are caring adults who can be there with them. And we talk about hard subjects. We're talking about mental health. And really in youth group, it's a lot easier than from the pulpit to talk about mental health because we have small groups, we have discussions, we work through that kind of stuff. So if your son or daughter is dealing with anxiety, get them there. That's community they can do right now. Yes, it's not face-to-face. And I know I lament not being able to see my kids face-to-face right now. But we're doing what we can, and it's still community. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, and, not only are they connected with adults in that area, they're connected with other students that a lot of them are going through the same thing. So one of the things that, kind of promotes and fosters anxiety and depression is when our kids feel like they're going through something by themselves. Like there's no other person on the face of the earth that's going through this thing, right, but them. And so, to be involved in a youth group in a community where they're able to connect and see that, I may be in a boat, but I'm not in the boat by myself. I'm in the boat with other people. There are other people going through this. On the inverse, we all know the youth stories of like, your son or daughter comes home and goes, Mom, Dad, I found the one I'm going to marry. We're like, really? And I'm not saying that's not true. My friend Nick, his dad told his mom that he was going to marry her in kindergarten. And they've been married for like 52 years now. Look, those are really, really cool romantic stories. But some kids will come to you and like, no, you don't understand how much I love this person. Like, I'm married to your other parent, your dad or your mom. I'm pretty sure I know No, no one in the history of history has ever loved like we love each other, right? So kids tend to overemphasize that as well. They will put themselves in this boat by themselves, both in a good way and in a negative way as well. They go, well, no one's ever gone through, this kind and the opposite of that is like, no one's ever loved each other like me and this other person at school. And then they break up and they're like, no one's ever had the amount of sadness that I've had.
The despair that I have right now has never been matched.
Yeah, that's
in
right.
the history of the planet.
In the history of history is like, and this is why like the story of Romeo and Juliet really resounds with students because like, yes, like, no, don't do that. And so that didn't turn out well, but for them to be able to enter in community with caring adults that aren't their parents, which they do need their parents. Okay, their parents, despite what they might think and say, their parents are still the number one influence in their lives. That's just how it is. That's what the data shows. I've read a great deal of this stuff. Reading a book right now, a 2017 Barna Institute talked about youth, and that's still their findings. So. But to have an adult outside of their parents and then to have a youth community that they feel like they're a part of, that they can talk with is super duper important. So another thing that some people find helpful, especially if you're artistic, is to write down your thoughts. Write down your thoughts because in that moment of anxiety, in that moment of depression, you can write down your thoughts and then later reflect on those and go, are these accurately describing the situation, or did I get sucked down the rabbit hole? And just really started focusing only on the negative. And the thing is when a couple of things go wrong, it's like quicksand. It can become easy to then start going, well, here's all the other elements of life that goes wrong. This is where my wife suffers from anxiety and panic attacks. Here's where I can start getting sucked into things in the depression area, where I'll start going, well, this went wrong today and that went wrong. So then let me now sit down and spend some quality time figuring out all the other things that are wrong with my life. And I completely ignore the positive, even if and literally my wife will be right in front of me going, no, what about this? What about that? What about that? What about that? A bunch of positive things. So and I always have an argument against it. And so writing down our thoughts to look back on them to go, is this accurate, or is this a messed up, twisted view of the situation? And it's actually helped me. There's a lot of times where I start getting into that funk, and I start thinking, okay, well, is this like I'm feeling like it is, or is this something different? I've learned in my life that my feelings are good, but they can't always be trusted. At least not to the extremes. And so I can't trust every feeling I've ever had. And so I always start questioning my feelings. And for me, pastorally, I go, okay, do my feelings and do my experiences even, I can't even trust my own experiences. Do my feelings and my experiences line up with the truth in God's word, or am I making something up that's outside of it? And so that's been a help to me. And it doesn't mean that I don't fall off the bandwagon and have bad days. I'm going to be honest with you. Yesterday was a bad day for me. It's like every single thing that could have gone wrong went wrong, to the point to where the thing that I was trying to do, I was trying to record a couple of songs, my voice cut out and I couldn't do it anymore. And so I just needed to lay down, take a nap, get some tea. And it was very, very frustrating. And it's really, really easy to go down that rabbit hole. And so we just want to make sure that we don't go down, too far. So here's some strategies that are kind of long-term ones. Again, we talked about identifying and learning to manage your triggers. What triggers the anxiety? What triggers the depression? It could be a stressful job or work environment, or for your kids, it could be a stressful school environment. And don't assume that now that we've gone to e-learning, that the stress is gone. For some classes and for some students, it's more stressful now to be on e-learning than it would be if they'd just gone to school. For some students, it's much, much easier to go to a class, to sit there with the teacher, to raise their hand, to ask a question, to have that question answered immediately. Doing it like this online, whether it's through, I don't know, Titus used my youngest son used like a Google Medium the other day. They didn't use Zoom. I know some schools use WebEx, but
Yeah,
some
they're
schools
using Google Meet now. Yeah, Google
Google Meet.
Meet
That's
is
what
what
it
they're
is. Yeah.
using.
So, but for some students, that's a panic attack. I know that when Titus, who's in fourth grade, his teacher's like, okay, we're gonna have this meeting, and she got on, and there's 20 kids on there. It was literally like herding cats. Everyone wanted to talk, and they were talking over each other. And for some students, that becomes more of an anxious situation than if they just gone to class. And so let us not assume that just because we're not going to school, our kids aren't going to school, that the anxiety has been cut down. For some of them, it's actually elevated and raised the bar of anxiety. So that could be one. Traveling could be one. General traveling could be one, especially if you get on a freeway. My wife had a panic attack on the freeway once because we were in Southern California where there's a billion people. But even worse now, with it's not just about traveling from point A to point B. You have to worry about covering your face. Are other people sick? All this other stuff that can really be a trigger for anxiety.
Am I going to take it home to my family? If
Yeah.
I get this thing,
Yep.
especially for our teens. I know of a student right now whose dad's an essential worker, and he is not processing that well because grandma's at home.
Yeah.
And why is dad working if grandma's at home and she gets this? It can be really, really bad.
Yeah.
So they're trying to process all this extra stuff, and they're anxious. And the seniors who are like, am I going to have a graduation? What is my grade going to be like? They have no clue. So it's just a lot of opportunity for anxiousness right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, it's been a little bit nervous for my kids because I've been going out and going into the store and getting stuff. I'm diabetic, which means when my blood sugar is high, my immune system's low, which means I'm more susceptible to having adverse effects to, if I were to catch something. So another thing is it might just be genetic. That's just the reality of it. Anxiety, depression might be genetic. Look to your parents, to how you feel, and then how your kids might feel about it. So that may be something to watch out for. Withdrawal from drugs or certain medications could be a trigger for anxiety or depression, or side effects of certain medications. If you've switched a medication in your student recently, it could have adverse effects. Different trauma in life can definitely trigger anxiety or depression. And so when a trauma occurs, understand that the level of anxiety will go up, level of depression might go up as well. But we need to try to keep those in manageable ranges and not let them send us, over the edge. So some people have phobias. Agoraphobia is a fear of being around crowds or in open spaces. A lot of people have that, and that's definitely a trigger for anxiety and depression. Claustrophobia is another thing, and I'm sure, unless you're living in a mansion right now, you might be feeling claustrophobic, and even then, you might be feeling claustrophobic. I know our house is a 1,050 square foot home, and the walls come closing in real fast. And you go, hey, I want to get a little bit artistic. I want to do this project. Next thing you know, the whole living room's full of stuff, and it can feel claustrophobic really, really, really quickly. Chronic illnesses can set it off. Chronic pain. If you have a child that's an athlete, I know when I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, I played football, wrestling, and baseball, and by the time I was a junior, I was playing all sports in pain. And so, that can definitely be a contributor. Other illnesses, and then again, caffeine can definitely, if you have too much of it, can set things off. So,
don't let your kids just chug Mountain Dew this entire time. This is not going to be helpful.
No, stay away. And this is something I can't even begin to tell you how much I'm going to reiterate this right now. Stay away from drinks like Monster drinks. And I had a friend in California that literally had to go to the hospital, and he was a doctor, and he was having heart issues because he kept drinking these 5-hour energies and all this stuff, and man, it's bad news bears. So there are ways to get energy without necessarily shoving supplements into your body. And so for us, one of those big things is getting up and having a routine every day, even though you don't really have to go anywhere. And then, a daily exercise routine has been really good for that. So energy kind of breeds energy. That gets to my next one, having a daily routine. Just because we're in quarantine, I don't know how many of us, and I felt like this the other day. I got dressed up today, did my hair, did the whole thing, because we had to be out of the house early in the morning because of my failure to record the things yesterday. I had to go in this morning and do that. And so it was, it's just one of the things is like, wow, I got up at a decent hour, I combed my hair. I didn't change from my nighttime pajamas to my daytime pajamas. I put on an actual outfit and I felt human again. Right. And so I've had more than one conversation with people about how being in this situation where you forcibly can't go anywhere, that you just don't even feel human anymore, and to do things that make you human. So having a daily routine, like, look, just because you can sleep until noon doesn't mean you ought to sleep until noon. So getting up, getting a shower, changing clothes into like jeans and a shirt, not just into more sweatpants. Not that that's bad every once in a while, but when you start doing that day after day after day after day, then what ends up happening is it starts building up, and you're like, why am I even alive? Human beings need a reason to exist. There's a great study that was done. This guy did this for his doctoral dissertation, where he went and found in Southern California, went and found some guys that were standing on the street corner needing work. And there were 20 guys. And he said, okay, I'll pay you $10 an hour. And so he goes, I'll pay all of you, all 20 guys. They loaded up a couple of trucks, vans, and took them out to this area. And they said, okay, here's the measurements. There's going to be this hole, right? So it's going to be a 10 by 20 by 2 feet deep, 10 by 20. We want you to dig that out. So they dug it out. They paid him, sent him on their way. Next day, he goes back to the same corner, same guys. He says, hey, guys, I need you for some work. They all hopped in, took them back to the same hole, and had them fill it in and dig another one. So by Wednesday, they go to the same guys. Hey, guys, we need you for more work. Took the same guys back, filled in the hole, and right next to it, dug another one. So they're not actually doing anything productive. So by Thursday, they get to these guys, and they go, we need you to go. And half of them are like, we don't want to go. And he's like, I'll raise your rates to $20 an hour. I'll double it. And like, no, we don't have an interest in doing that. So even though he raised the wages, what ended up happening is without them feeling like they had purpose in their work and purpose in their life, the money didn't matter. They didn't want to get involved in it. And so we're the same way. If we wake up every day going, I can't go outside, I can only go to the store, and really only one person should be going in the store at a time to get groceries. So the rest of us are just stuck in quarantine. And if we don't give ourselves purpose each and every day, it's really, really easy to get sucked down that rabbit hole of anxiety and depression. So have a daily routine. Some things that I found that have been great for my diet is green tea's been good. Dark chocolate in moderation has been good, and omega-3 fatty acids. That's as a diabetic. Those have been really, really good for me. Consult your doctor about what would be healthy for you as well. And so again, just to keep your mind, your body, and then your actions in line are helpful in this. So here are some signs of, and this isn't from me, this is from an online publication, signs of possible anxiety attacks. So feeling like you're in danger, panic and dread, nervousness or restlessness, especially when they're associated with nothing. So if you have nervousness regarding something specific, then it's associated with that. But when having a panic attack, oftentimes you'll feel nervous and restless about things that aren't happening. An increase in heart rate. A lot of us are wearing Fitbit or Apple Watches, and those are really good about, they don't replace, your physician, but they're really good about telling us what our heart rate is. Sweating for no reason, trembling, chills, being tired or weak. Again, that's a hard one in this quarantine time, because a lot of us are tired because we're tired. Tiredness, just like energy breeds energy, tired breeds tired. So if we don't have a daily routine, if we're not making sure that we get daily exercise, we can just become tired.
And we also have parents who are working from home, And I don't know about you guys, but for me, my job has gotten exponentially more hours a week. You know, I'm on Zoom calls and I'm on website stuff, taking care of this, I got to do youth group. And then you also have your kids who are at home in the same space, and you're having to watch them and help them with their e-learning, and that can just wear you out. You can just be, 8 p.m. The kids go to bed, and you're like, I'm going to bed as well. And
Yeah.
sometimes that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for those parents who are working at home or working from home, know that you're asking your kids to be quiet while you're doing something like this. Some of us are just typing, and that's fine. But what happens is our job becomes more tense and more tight, and then we get frustrated. We lose patience. We lash out on them. They feel like they've got to be quiet or they're not good enough, and then they start isolating themselves, feeling anxious as well. And so we can definitely start seeing the cyclical nature of this quarantine that we're in having an effect not only on us but on them as well. So make sure that you're checking in with your kids. If you feel like you're seeing these things and you think that they need to see a doctor, please go seek the advice of a medical professional in that area. So those were just some experiences that I've had in my household, along with some stuff from clinical articles and journals that I've read that could help out with just showing signs and some coping mechanisms that you can help yourself and your kids with. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bryan, for talking about this subject. I know it's hard for a lot of people,
Yeah.
Especially, you see your kids struggling right now. You're not sure what to do. And I think just giving you some tips and some helpful hints is really important.
Right.
So, yeah, next week we have discipline and what that looks like at a home right now, especially during a time like this.
Yep.
We are going to be discussing that from experience, and I can tell you from me some failed attempts and some adjustments in this time. So yeah, we'll hope to see you guys next week, and have a great week.
Hey, you guys have a great week.